That was a you're a tough act to follow, Tim. My name is Carol McDaid, and I'm a woman in long-term recovery. And for the McShinites out there, I'm going to talk a little bit about some professional experiences I've had working as a professional advocate on behalf of the addiction treatment and recovery fields over the last, 25 plus years. And I hope you'll be able to get something out of the message around the experiences I've had that you can apply in your own personal recovery. I've seen a lot of changes in our field over those 25 years, and on the whole, they've mostly been positive. But lately, with all of the attention on the opioid epidemic, has come more funding, more media attention, and more focus on our field. And you'd think that primarily would be a good thing, right? And I think in a lot of ways it has been. But I've been concerned about the anti-competitive and frankly downright nasty practices within the treatment and recovery community that are ultimately hurting the patients and the families that I and so many like me have dedicated their lives and their professional careers to serving. And I know that we are better than this. Early in my career working as an advocate, I watched the CEO of an addiction treatment center stop a meeting in its tracks with a member of Congress to drive their aide, who was obviously in need of addiction help, to a competitor's treatment center that was about 30 miles up the road, and guaranteed him a scholarship out of his own pocket if they wouldn't give it to the congressman's aide, en route to that treatment center. Right on these very grounds of this church and this recovery center, I watched a former drug czar reach into his pocket after hearing the story of one of the local recovery community members in Richmond, who had heard her story that on Monday she was going to be locked up because she was late on her child support payments for two adult children who were both in their 20s, because her child support payments had been accruing interest while she was locked up in jail and prison for over 5 years. And her grown children had no longer needed her support for many, many years. But in our state, interest accrues on your child support while you are locked up with no visible means of having an affordable job. And that drug czar felt so badly about her going that he pulled $100 out of his pocket to pay towards her late fines and her fines. I've known and worked for many addiction physicians back in the day who worked 3 part-time jobs at once so that they could raise a family, repay medical student loans, just so that they could work in this field and treat patients with substance use disorders. And I watched a recovery center founder give up a lucrative, for-profit business, go without pay for over 5 years, just so that he could serve recovering people or people seeking recovery in his local community, because the local community and the metroplex that are supposed to serve indigent people in that community, there was a 30-day waiting list for help. So he gave up his career so that he could set up a place where people in this community could get help. I watched that. These are the people that our field is comprised of. These are the people who are motivated by the ability and the willingness to serve others who have to care for and treat people who have the disease of addiction. This is the mission that drives them. Working in the addiction field is not now, nor has it ever been, for the vast majority of credible organizations and the credible people that make up those organizations, a get-rich-quick scheme. But I recently watched a congressional staffer accuse a CEO of one of the largest treatment centers in this country of only giving out scholarships because it was part of a complicated kickback scheme, Even though I know this man and know he's giving out these scholarships out of the goodness of his heart, and even though he gets no credit because he does not have to give any charity care as part of his obligation. This attitude has happened because parts of the treatment industry have gone to war in the media and in government to tarnish the reputation of their competitors. We all suffer when we turn the guns inward and shoot inward on ourselves like this. While it's very clear that a few bad actors in the field of addiction have properly gotten the negative media and legal attention, frankly, that they deserve, to treat the entire addiction treatment and recovery field as all bad actors and let them be branded as sleazy. We've allowed ourselves to be branded as sleazy because we've been busy fighting ourselves. We should spend that time and energy fighting the disease of addiction and caring for the people that suffer from it. It's high time we spend this time and energy cleaning up our reputation in this field. We are better than this. Although the circumstances that people who serve in our field, in the field of addiction treatment and recovery, are difficult. Reimbursement rates on average are 20 to 30% lower, and that's with studies who are being very conservative, than the rest of healthcare. And that's even with laws that outlaw these lower reimbursement rates. They're supposed to be equal with other medical providers, and for 10 years, payers have flagrantly broken that law. Our patients are tougher to treat, and our systems and supports are more fragmented. Although better, and a hell of a lot better than when I got in the field 25 years ago, there is still stigma against the patients and even the providers and the facilities who treat them, and discriminatory laws and other barriers that set our patients up to fail regardless of how fantastic treatment we provide or recovery supports or interventions that we serve our patients with. Therefore, it particularly troubles me that private disputes within our industry are being played out on the public stage under the guise of protecting patients from fraud and abuse. Like I said before, there has been some, and it should be cleaned up, and I'm glad to see that those people who've been perpetrating that fraud are getting locked up at higher rates than ever before. And everybody who's credible in our field agrees that this needs to go away. I think, though, that we need to make sure that we're not using this as a banner to villainize each other, gain competitive edge on our competitors, settle old scores, have personality disputes and settle old scores against personalities we don't like, gain market share against our competitors, gain regulatory powers over people that we view as threats if we're in, government or local, state, or federal government, reduce marketing costs, win government contracts, or blunt the impact of pending legislation. Using fraud to go after personal gain is misleading to patients and families and will end up deterring them if we keep letting our industry get a bad name forever seeking help. People, if we keep in the name of fraud and abuse and saying everyone in our industry is sleazy, patients aren't going to want to seek help and their families aren't going to want to help them get the help that they need. But people in our industry can do good and do well at the same time. I have never been a believer that you have to take a vow of poverty to work in this field. You don't. You can make a decent, fair living and serve people at the same time. We have made our family's life about that, and I have made my professional career about that. And yeah, there's a little bit of Robin Hood involved in that. There is. But what we do is make sure that it all evens out. And we can run successful addiction treatment and recovery organizations, and we can adapt to changing market dynamics. Nobody's promised a living for life. We have to make changes. We have to grow and adapt. But we can do it without cannibalizing each other giving each other and the field a black eye and hurting families and patients to give people an advantage. And while the field is increasingly competitive, we still have more patients that need help than any other sector of healthcare. And let me underscore that. We have more patients and families and individuals that need help and services. Only 10% of the people that need help in this field are getting help. We got 90% wide open. We don't need to have to slit each other's throats to get business. We don't have to do it. So let's reconnect with what brought us to this work. Let's air out our concerns together. Let's privately develop consensus-based strategies on our most controversial issues that we may disagree on before any more damage is done. We know better and we can do better. And here are my 6 principles that I think should drive this consensus-based discussion. Number 1, and for those people who are in recovery, these are some of the principles that you may find and hear familiar from the step work that you do. Number 1, unity. Borrow a page from recovery principles that guide us to place principles before personalities. Agree on a few common goals for the greater good. Number 2, compassion. Remember where we come from. Patients, participants deserve respect, and those in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Number 3, surrender the need for total control. The need for control reflects personal weakness and insecurity. It makes organizations and individuals vulnerable. Number 4, practice humility. Let others shine. Number 5, understand on a deep level the spiritual principle of reciprocity. If you undercut people now for short-term gain, it will come back and you will have long-term harm on your hands. And number 6, the final principle, employ servant leadership, not ego-driven power for power's sake. Thank you so much.
McShin Foundation is Virginia's leading peer-to-peer recovery organization. If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, let us get you connected. We can help you build a solid foundation through recovery. Here at the McShin Foundation, we are committed to healing families and saving lives.